Okay, let's look at Standard 17, Substandard C. We're still talking about the Great Depression here. Explain the social and political impact of widespread unemployment. So a big characteristic of the Great Depression was unemployment. But more than unemployment, our standards at close examination, we see an adjective here, widespread unemployment. In other words, all over the United States people were unemployed. 25%. 13 million people were unemployed at the time. And that is going to result in homeless people living in the streets and out on beside railroad tracks and these things we call Hoovervilles, where these makeshift shacks are put up for people to live in and make do. Okay, let's look at where this name's come from. President Hoover was the president during the Great Depression. And a lot of people blamed him on the Great Depression. They blame it on Hoover. Here's a little cartoon of the time. Although a lot of the things that caused the Great Depression were already in play before Hoover became president. And here's they nicknamed these newspapers that homeless people used to cover themselves up with as Hoover blankets. Here's a car, an automobile. People were too poor to put gasoline in it to use it, so they hooked the horses up to it, and they call these Hoover wagons. So he catches a lot of blame for what happened during the Great Depression since he was the president in 1929. All right, let's move on to widespread unemployment. This is unemployment all across the United States. And from 1929 to 1940, in 1929, unemployment rate was at 3.2%. That's not bad at all. That's not many people without a job, okay? But by 1932, the lowest part of the Great Depression, unemployment had risen. The number of people without a job had increased. That's what this line upward means. And what this means is over 12 million. In other words, 13 million people were unemployed. By 1932, 24.9%, almost 25% of the people were unemployed in the United States. 1 in every 4 people was unemployed. So that's widespread unemployment right there. Okay, and here's some pictures of some people who were unemployed. Here's a guy asking for a job. Says he doesn't want charity, his honor. Here's a guy here standing here in a line waiting for jobs. Look at this line here. Here's a guy here on the sidewalk sleeping in despair without a job. Homeless probably. Here's some guys here unemployed, probably wishing they had a job. Here's a sign for the Chamber of Commerce for the unemployed people. Keep going. We can't take care of our own. Okay. Here's a soup line, or where they're giving out free coffee and donuts. These people who are homeless, who are without jobs and unemployed. Here's another soup kitchen here. There's another one here where they're eating. These homeless people were provided food. It's a different image. Here's a bread line here. All this is a result of the Great Depression and this 25% unemployment rate. 13 million people without jobs. Here's a bread line here. Look at the people lined up around here waiting to get something to eat. This is horrible. It's another bread line here. It's a loaf of bread he's handing them. There's some unemployed men here. Yeah, look at the despair in this guy's face. Here's that line again, waiting for employment. Here's a line of African American men in Tennessee, 1938. This picture's by Dorothea Lane. The employment office or employment service in Tennessee, where these men are trying to get jobs, and how all this unemployment is going to lead to these Hoovervilles is the second part of our standard. And Hoovervilles were homeless shelters named and blamed on President Hoover, like the Hoover blankets and the Hoover wagons. These homeless shelters, these makeshift shacks, people were living in these because they had lost their jobs or homes. They were penniless, and they lived in these little shacks because that's all they had. And they just threw these together, whatever they could find. And here's some pictures by Dorothea Lange here. We're going to look at a picture of this woman here in a moment. Her picture becomes one of the most famous of this time period. Here's a little shack here thrown together. Here's where an old automobile was used, rusted out old automobile, where they just made a makeshift tent there. Going to use this. This is a Hooverville. This picture here is the most famous picture, and it was taken by Dorothea Lange in 1936. Interesting story. If you want to look up migrant mother on the internet, this woman's name later on, she was identified as Florence Owens Thompson. And all her children, she had about, I can't remember how many, 7 I think, children. And it's an interesting story behind this picture, but you can see the despair and the anguish in her face and how she's going to take care of these children, provide for them. Here's a different one here. Here's the same woman and children, but this shows the shack that they were living in. This looks like it was thrown together. And this is Dorothea Lange, the woman who took all these pictures in the 1930s. It's a photographer there. I like her car there. I'm going to get that picture for you. It's a 1936 car there. She took a lot of these pictures. This is one in Elm Grove, Oklahoma, that shows these people living in abject poverty, just total poverty here. And these shacks they had to put together and throw together because they were without homes and without money. Here's a woman living out of her car. Here's some guys shacked up in a room together. And here's a Hooverville community where they got out and threw these shacks together near railroad tracks and industrial areas and cities, all caused by unemployment, widespread unemployment. Here's another one. All over the United States. Here's a guy putting these rocks on top of his roof and looks like tar paper. Just threw some things together and made him a little shack there. This guy living in a little tent, looks like a corn patch. Okay, I think we've met our burden here. I think probably overkill, but explain the social and political impact of widespread unemployment that resulted in developments such as Hoovervilles. Ask questions in class, raise your hand, good luck on the quiz, test, and EOCT.